and image of a relationship that's out there. I think we get sold a bill of goods, and then you get into the reality and you kind of go, man, this sucks. This sucks more than this is enjoyable. So what does forgiveness look like? What does reconciliation look like? Do you want to do the hard things required to rebuild trust and that kind of stuff? So I think that becomes a defining moment. But marriage is also a front row seat to your spouse's growth process. And if they haven't dealt with stuff in their lives, if I got a greed issue, if I have a lust issue, if I have a, honesty issue, oftentimes that being dealt with and the growth that I need in that is going to result in me making some decisions that are usually fairly painful for the person who's in a marriage with me. And I think we've bought into the myth and lie that we would be able to resolve every issue we have in marriage. And the reality is there's a set of specific unresolvable issues we'll never get there.
Well, welcome to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. Do you ever think that if you could only find your soulmate, then I would have the perfect marriage? We live in a society where men and women are basing their relationships on the latest Matthew McConaughey Rom-Com. And between that and the plethora of romance novels, it's not a wonder we get this idyllic visions of the perfect marriage. And even for men, we fall into this trap. So what is the truth? Is the truth about having a successful marriage? Well, today, my guests and I are going to unpack 3 problems with marriages and a whole lot more. So do stay tuned. Now, before we get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platforms so you can stay updated on the latest content, as well as helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. Now, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Do you feel disconnected in your marriage? And have you tried counseling but didn't get the results you were expecting? From experience, I can attest to dealing with both of these challenges. And when you're in the middle of the storm, it can be hard to find a safe place to land. And because I know this all too well, it's important to find experts to help us get grounded and get centered as we try to put our lives back together. So allow me to introduce my guest today. My guest is Eric Wooten. Eric is a dynamic speaker, an author, and leader and relationship expert. He uses his 15 years of experience as a pastor and a licensed professional counselor to help singles develop healthy dating relationships and couples build strong and thriving marriages. Eric combines his transformative yet easy to digest frameworks and quick wit to help couples of all ages and backgrounds enjoy the journey towards fulfilling relationships that can go the distance. Welcome to the show, Eric. How are things today?
Good. Thank you for having me, Alan. You always got to love those intros. And now you feel the obligation to be an expert, be witty, and say everything right.
Yeah, you betcha.
I always joke with the longer the intro, the probably less you bring to the table, right? If I was Bono, you'd just say, "Hey, everybody, Bono." We don't need to say anything else, right? So good to be here, though. Good to be here.
Yeah, listen, it's good to have you on the show for sure. Eric, a lot of the work that we focus on here at The Awakened Man is about talking about how each of us are on our own hero's quest or our own hero's journey. And as you know, in each of our journeys, there's going to be times when we're going to have specific challenges that we're going to be faced with. And so I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how some of the challenges that you faced in your life, how you overcame them, and how it's paved the way to who you are today and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's we can talk all day long about who we are and what we want to be, but when those things are challenges, when we find out if we're really that, right? So I think that pertains to what I'm doing in marriage work and counseling and helping couples. I think for us, our first my wife and I have been married 28 years now, but our first 10 years were tough, and I felt kind of like almost felt like people the people around us were like, hey, good job, get married, kind of with their fingers crossed behind their back, like, this is going to be amazing. And nobody really telling you what this thing's about, right? I think we, like you mentioned earlier, and we'll probably get into, with the romance novels and movies and image of a relationship that's out there, I think we get sold a bill of goods, and then you get into the reality and you kind of go, man, this sucks. This sucks more than this is enjoyable. So I think we stumbled back and forth for the first 10 years. And then my wife had an affair just short of 10 years into our marriage. And, that's a defining moment in a relationship, right? Not only is it painful and all the stuff that entails with that, but that's where you really find out, like, what does commitment mean? What does forgiveness look like? What does reconciliation look like? Do you want to do the hard things required to rebuild trust and that kind of stuff? So I think that becomes a defining moment, and for us and for a lot of couples that I work with, that affairs are not fatal, and oftentimes they're revealing of what wasn't going on and what you weren't doing, and require a greater level of communication and depth of relationship. And so, and it's one of those things, nobody goes, yeah, thank you, sir, give me another, but you also kind of go, the fruit of what came out of it,
Yeah,
I'll take that all day long. So I think that was definitely a pivotal, defining moment, really to have to dig deep and really talk about what this thing needs to look like. But then also, I'm of the belief that we're not here on earth for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so if that's your mindset, I think with any painful situation you go through, or difficulty or struggle, you got to ask yourself, what can I do with this? Who can I help other people not go through what I've gone through? And I think that's not only challenges, but success, right? If I've been given success as well, how can I help people, jump off my shoulders that don't have to do the work I've done to get where I'm at? And so, that was a defining moment. I think that's part of the hero's journey. I think that's a scar that marks you, that changes you for the better, and gives you a passion to help others.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, I just have to, for, total transparency here, we went through a similar situation in my marriage about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I guess it's been that long now. And the infidelity was on my part. And I say all the time that, my wife saw the man in me that I didn't see yet, and I give her such courage and such kudos for having the courage to allow that to transform and shape and change me. And just as I'm sure you had, as you saw the woman inside of your wife that she has yet to see. And Sure. It helped us really to find out and fix. And I like how you talked about, how it's a revealing piece. We can no longer hide behind the things that are unsaid. And we need to challenge ourselves to say the things that need to be said, and to work through our problems, instead of, like using the image of well, it's just, I just got to wait for the second chapter or the third act of the play, and then everything will be all fine. And it's not like that. It takes years of work and healing. And even to this day, there are still moments, I'm sure, for yourselves as well, that there are pieces that happen that we really recognize there's work that we need to do.
Yeah. And, again, going back to what I said going into marriage, I think, people are not presenting what it's really all about and what you're signing up for. I think one of the things we do sign up for, whether you like it or not, is you become a part of your spouse's healing process, right? You also become a part of your spouse's, for those who are people of faith, they would call it sanctification process. For people who don't have faith, just your growth process. But marriage is also a front row seat to your spouse's growth process. And if they haven't dealt with stuff in their lives, if I got a greed issue, if I have a lust issue, if I have a, honesty issue, oftentimes that being dealt with and the growth that I need in that is going to result in me making some decisions that are usually fairly painful for the person who's in a marriage with me. Right. And so like you said, your wife got to see who the real you was, or the potential of you, but she also had to endure the pain of your decision.
Yes.
As part of your process to get to where you are. And, that's the part of the relationship we go, that's not fair. Well, You're right. The hope is, if there's singles listening today, the hope is that they'll do the self work before they get into a marriage, and you're never done, right? So it's not like you accomplish it and I'm good now, but you've at least done a level of work where you're not bringing a ton of baggage and woundedness into a marriage, because that's going to be, real painful and difficult for the other person who's got to deal with it and experience some of the consequences of your decisions as you're managing through it. So yeah, that's a reality of marriage. I don't care who you are, that's get a front row seat.
Excuse me. Absolutely. And the other side of that coin, the thing that we're being implicit, so I'll be explicit about it, is that just because there was the opportunity for to save the marriage and do some work, had I not done the work, had in your situation the work wasn't being done on the other side, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation.
Absolutely.
It'd be completely different. So it's not, and I think that's what I really want the message for our listeners to take away here, is that it requires work every day. And you don't necessarily have to have the deep wound and pain of an affair to start the healing process and to start working. You got to go in it eyes wide open, start working from day one. And it's not a rom-com. It's not a romance novel of life. You got stuff to do. I always say, man, if you want to figure out what you're made of, get married, have kids, start a business. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, brother.
Right.
That
will work everything out of you. Because you're right. They have different things, right? There's things about me that I thought were good until I was married. And then there's things about me I thought I was square on in a marriage relationship that parenting revealed or brought out. And certainly entrepreneurship or business is gonna reveal some things in your life as well. So you are right.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get right to this. I talked about in the opening here about defining our soulmate, and I was reading an article on your blog, and I really liked how you framed this whole idea of soulmates. I just wanted to, really, unpack that a little bit more and give us your thoughts on the idea of, is there such a thing as a soulmate, and should we even be spending any time worrying about finding the right one?
Yeah, no, I think soulmates are a load of crap. And so the romantics on here are mad at me, and there's some people listening that, quote, have found their soulmate and would argue with me. And there's people who were married once and that ended, and their second marriage, they feel like they've really found their soulmate this time. And, but the reality is, we make a choice, and marriage is a commitment. I think love is a verb. It's a choice. It's something we do. It's not something we feel. And, there's not this one out there that's perfect. I believe another one of the truths nobody told you when you got married is that marriage is a commitment to a specific set of unresolvable issues. That's why, irreconcilable differences as a, cause for divorce seems foolish to me, because we all have them. And if I marry one person, we're going to have a set of differences that we'll never resolve, that we have to learn to manage. And if I divorce them and marry somebody new tomorrow, I'll probably pick a different set, because I don't want the same set. So this person, these 4 characteristics really drove me crazy. So I'm gonna find somebody that doesn't exhibit those. But the flip side of their strengths are going to be some issues that we deal with as well. And so you're going to get it. I think there's wisdom in the dating process, and, finding someone with shared values and some of the characteristics that I think we would attach to a, quote, soulmate. But again, I think a lot of the people that find that, especially the ones that find it, at a later in life in a second marriage, and it's like, well, it's easier at that point, because if I were to go get married tomorrow, my child rearing years are over. So I would not look for a spouse who would be a good mother, because that would not be an important shared goal anymore. That wouldn't be a necessary value. I would look for whatever I plan to do in my last 30 some years. And so you're looking for a different category. When you get married in your 20s and you're trying to, have a 50-year marriage, there's going to be different seasons, and it's going to require change and different things. So to think you're finding this person that is your soulmate, and, the romance novels have sold us this lie that one other person should be our everything, our best friend, our confidant, our cheerleader, our emotional support person, our coworker side by side in our business as a family, our romantic lover. Every once in a while, I'm not saying there's not some exceptions out there who are able to manage that, but that's why we have, community and friendships and other people around us, because one person was not designed to carry the load that we've decided a spouse is supposed to provide at this point. And soulmates, at the end of the day, it came from Greek mythology, right?
Yep.
So Zeus was afraid that the humans were too powerful, and they had 4 legs, 4 arms and a split head. And so he cut them in 2 so they would be bound for the rest of eternity trying to find their other half, right? That's where soulmate came from. It's Greek mythology. We don't need to say any more beside that, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. And it's so true, right? And I think the other point you're bringing forward is that we're not saying that you shouldn't be having these conversations, when you're in that courtship phase, to get centered in, get in alignment with the same values, the same, ideally the same beliefs, right? Not necessarily have to have necessarily the same, faith tradition, although that sure helps in the whole process, but it's to be in sync with some really key pieces. And I always look at marriage as a 3-legged stool. Like, are we on the same page when it comes to money and finances? Are we on the same page when it comes to, sex and how that whole piece is? And are we on the same page when it comes to faith and our belief structure? And if you can be on the same page and have an understanding and appreciation for your spouse in those areas, then you're going to be okay. But, one of those legs isn't in alignment, that stool's not going to be very sturdy. I think that's important, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think there's some important things like that, like, shared values, I think, are huge. So you're not having competing values. I think, some level, when people talk about, are we, quote, compatible? I think compatibility is a combination of, chemistry, that there is some, I'm not a big like, oh, we got to have chemistry, but do I like you? Do I enjoy you? There's got to be a little bit of something there, right? Yeah. I think the other one's comparability, like, where are we similar? And then complementarity, where do our differences make each other better, rather than one person stomping all over the other person's too. So, I mean, there's
lots going.
It's not a crapshoot. Like, there's practical data out there on what makes successful relationships, and we can date with our heart a little bit, but our head too, and make sound decisions. And you can end up with a pretty good relationship if you're willing to be intentional and you've selected somebody that you share a lot of the common areas. So we don't need to, the soulmate idea kind of, I feel like, is fatalistic too. Like, oh crap, if I picked wrong, now I've made the mistake of my life. And it almost seems like it's got to find me or else I'm doomed. Nah, come on, man. It's a commitment. You make a decision, you make a good decision based on what you value, and put in the work.
Exactly. Well, and you use a great word there, intentional, right? And, that's really big in the work that we do here at the Awakened Man is, are we living intentionally, living a life of purpose, on purpose is what we say. So are you, do you have intention behind what you're doing? And do you understand the implicit intention is maybe you haven't been articulating it. And so you're unconscious in what you're doing on a day-to-day life.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, for me, when people always try to pin you on, what's most important for marriage, right? And so for me, going back to your 3-legged stool analogy, for me, the 3 pillars would be, for me, intentionality, you just said, community, and personal responsibility would be the 3 things I think are key. And so that intentionality is huge. And that's another myth I think the world has sold us, that people assume that if a relationship's great, that everything necessary in the relationship was going to happen spontaneously and organically. And if it's not, something must be wrong. And that's just not true. If you want, great sex, if you want great communication, if you want a great friendship, you plan it, you're intentional, you set aside time for it, you schedule it, you calendar it, it's like, the idea that we would just stumble into some level of greatness spontaneously makes zero sense. But that's the that's the model, right? That's the
Yep.
romance, novels and movies. And honestly, that's some of our dating experience, because we don't have the same relational dynamics and pressures dating that we do in marriage. And so dating can feel like, oh my gosh, it's just, this is great. Everything just kind of happens. And it's like, man, not when you got a job and a mortgage and kids and dogs and, throw up on the carpet and all the other stuff that's not real romantic. And so intentionality really does become key. Whatever is important for your relationship, you need to be intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right bang on. Love that. The other thing I mentioned in the opening part there, I talked about that there are 3 problems with marriage today. And I think we're already starting to unpack a couple of them, but I thought we'd be more explicit on what have you come to find in your work that are 3 problems that you're seeing with marriages today?
Yeah, I think I just, 3 P's to keep it easy. So I think we have preparation problems. We've talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I think we've got priority problems. That's where intentionality comes in. And then I think we got protection problems. We don't set good boundaries often for ourselves and our relationship. And there's just a lot of things that can kind of attack and, diminish relationship if we're not paying attention. I mean, obviously kids can, children can wreck time together in relationship. Our calendar can, our, comparing ourselves to others, I think. And so I just think there's a lot of people coming into marriage and they haven't properly prepared. They don't know what it takes. They've not done, premarital counseling or courses or some of those kind of things. They've got a wrong mindset and expectations, and that sets them up for failure. And then, priorities and protection. So
yeah, it makes complete sense to me for sure. Now, listen, your work is actually called these called altered marriage, and I really like how you spelt that out and done that. So, tell me, what's the best thing that's happened since you've started doing this work with altered marriage?
The best thing that's happened, I think, on a personal level, like you said, right? Marriage, kids, and business will reveal some stuff. On a personal level, what has been revealed to me is I'm a lot more emotional than I thought I was. I'm generally pretty even keeled, laid back. I don't have highs and lows. But the roller coaster of business and entrepreneurship has reminded me, man, you're a little more emotional. You like wins a lot more than you like failure, and you don't like failure enough that you'll avoid doing some stuff. So just on a personal level, that's been a painful win. But I think on a, serving couples and helping people, it's been cool to see, especially, I launched this in March of 2020. So a hot 2 weeks before COVID shut everything down. So it's been fun to see what online looks like. It's been fun to see, how you can actually create some level of community and resource and connect with people that you would have never been able to with our old kind of mindset of let's do stuff local, in groups, in person. And I miss that. There's a place for that. I do some retreats. I just did a couple marriage retreats in Mexico in October. And so I love that. There's a place for that, but it's been fun to see how you can kind of create a community online and really support couples, and then have couples connect and support each other. So a lot like what you do for men, I've been doing for couples. And so whether it's a Zoom class or a membership or, even counseling, it's been pretty cool. Or even what we're doing, right? The fact that, in 2 different countries, having a conversation about intentionality has been pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things is the same on our end. We've really started this work just prior to the COVID shutting everything down. And then when that happened, you had to figure out quickly to change it into an online form. And it's just been opened up the floodgates in terms of opportunity and everything. And I just want to commend you, Eric, for, being real with us there and answering and saying, like, entrepreneurship is hard work, right? And you're finding out the stuff, that the pain points that we don't necessarily want to admit to ourselves as guys. We'd rather not say it out loud. And, thank you so much for, saying what the stuff that you don't care for, the losses and how it's affecting you. And yet you're still here showing up every day anyways, having and putting in the work. And that's what's key. And that as we grow as men, we understand that, these things that we put in front of us to do are there to challenge who we are and to really raise the level of our standard and of our character, so that when it is revealed, that we can be that guiding light for someone, especially ourselves.
Yeah. And that's why, what you do is so valuable. I mean, this morning I had a meeting, just me and another guy for coffee that's been a longtime friend. And it really was. And we were talking about that. The word that he used with me was he's tired. And I said, I get that. I'm the same way. This emotional, working hard, carrying the weight, for a lot of men, carrying the weight, financial weight of the family. And a lot of men, men don't grow up in environments where sharing difficulties and emotionality is, I played sports growing up, and I don't remember in, decades of playing the sports, a guy ever walking into a locker room and saying, hey, fellas, this has been a tough week for me and I'm just struggling emotionally. And then all the guys hug him and tell him he's going to be okay. Right. I mean, that happens never. And so you just got to get to this place. But when guys are actually willing to be open and honest and say, yeah, man, I'm just tired. I just don't feel like doing the things I need to do. And which is, for me and him, we both left coffee this morning, encouraged, a little more energized, a little ready to get back in and do the things we need to do. And so the stuff that you're doing to try to rally men and get men, talking, we struggle, man. We're men, we're human. And so to have an environment where you're around other guys you can struggle with and be encouraged with is really huge.
Yeah. And so true about our, as you're telling a story about, playing sports as a kid, and that, I think we spent more time cutting each other down and making fun of of our weaknesses and picking on each other, that, heaven forbid you'd want to come into the locker room, even say anything remotely that could be construed as weakness, because they'd be all over you.
That would be your nickname, right? I mean, it's like the slowest guy was Flash and the fat guy was Slim. And I mean, you come in and share something vulnerable. Oh yeah, you're gonna be some name for the rest of your life for sure.
Yeah. And so it's nice to see then. And while there's, as adults now, we can have a better understanding of that, but it's nice to see that we've evolved somewhat and we can actually be a bit more raw and more truthful about where we're coming from. And I think that's so important, because it also is important. And we tie this back to marriage. I'm a believer that I think at least in my experience with my marriage, the more, I hate to use this word stoic, but the more that I would keep everything inside and not share, the harder it is for my wife to connect to me.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you could now share with us some of the keys to successful relationships, and what would those look like? And would being able to be vulnerable be one of those?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Like I said before, I think that my three pillars would be community, intentionality, and personal responsibility. And so that community aspect, if somebody, pressed me and said, hey, you only get one thing, what's the most important thing for marriage? I'll pick community every single day. I just think that we need other people in our lives that are trying to, we understand it in business, right? All the business books, you're the composite of the 5 people you spend your most time with, and, all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, you need other couples around you. There's going to be seasons where your spouse is not your biggest cheerleader or supporter, and you're going to need that from outside people. There's going to be seasons where you don't want to be held accountable, and your spouse can't hold you accountable. And do you have some outside people that there's security? I mean, part of the security, hopefully in marriage, is my wife trusts me and my integrity and that kind of stuff. But an added level is, if that starts to wane, that she's got a group of guys that she can call and go get your guy, Eric, man. He ain't acting right, or he hadn't been coming home at night, or he won't listen to me, or we need help and he won't go get help. And knowing that you've got some other people who can hold you guys accountable to the commitments you made is gigantic and necessary. And so I think that, that's a part of success in marriages. Get yourself around some other people. And it also helps to realize you're not the only one going through what you're going through. And you look on social media and look at everybody else around you. It looks like everybody's fantastic. And I know as a counselor I can say with 100% confidence, the people I know that post the most on social media about how great their spouse is and are out eating all the time and doing that kind of stuff are the same ones that are sending me messages because their marriage is a mess. The couples that are solid, they don't post a whole lot. And so we end up comparing ourselves to this image, and it's like those people are actually the worst ones off, the ones you think are the best. And so we need other people. There's something comforting to know that other people don't have it all together, and
Yeah,
we need community.
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It was so unique when you said that if you were pressed, that the word you would say would be community. And I was waiting and wondering, how is that going to come into play? And then when you talked about, if there's a challenge in my marriage, and my wife's name's Kim, and Kim knew that there was 2 or 3 guys that she could call and say, hey, check in with Al, like that, the power behind that.
Oh yeah.
Because I wouldn't necessarily have shared that with those guys, but she sees it. She knows there's stuff going on, and there's that strength in the community because everyone's in it for the same reason, right? We're growing ourselves as men and as couples, and wanting to form that bond. And when you said that, I went, how is he going to get into community? And brother, like that's just so powerful. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my, I'll die on that hill.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
now,
can,
listen, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll say, listen, we spent a lot of time talking about, being in a relationship, but I do have a fair chunk of listeners that are single as well. So why is there single guys having so many struggles and challenges to be able to date effectively? And
right.
And I'm glad. I'm 56. I never have to be in the dating game again, but I know there's other folks that are listening that unfortunately are in that world and have to go through that. And give us some wisdom on that there.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it starts with an unhealthy projection of what this thing is supposed to look like. And so, I'll say it this way. I think the world has over romanticized relationship. And for people in faith communities, I think the church has over spiritualized relationships and put us in a weird place. And so I taught, I served on staff at a few different churches over the past decade. And so have talked to a lot of people of faith and who are sitting around, quote, waiting on God to bring them their person. And I'm just like, we don't apply that mentality to anything else in our lives. We don't, if you feel like, your passion is to be an engineer, you don't sit around and wait for, Lockheed Martin to knock on your door and bring you in as their latest aeronautical engineer. You pick a school and you go get a degree. And then after you do that, so there's effort involved, right? You got to date, you got to get out there, you got to, and so, but then on the other side, it's been so over romanticized that I think people are dating with their hearts and not their heads. And it's got to be a combination. I think community is huge for dating too, because you are going to miss stuff when your feelings get involved. You are going to be willing to overlook red flags because you really love them and care about them. And you should have a community of people around you who will see what you don't, who will call that out, who will hold you accountable. And I think, even for people dating, it's like, don't date in isolation, have your community of people who care about you and know you best involved in the dating process, because they'll pick up on stuff in a hurry. And if they say it's a no-go, that should be all you need. So I just think part of it's the picture that has been painted that is now created. And then all the dating advice out there. If, I'm mostly speaking to marriage and stuff on my YouTube channel and that kind of stuff. I'll do some dating ones every once in a while, but I've steered clear of some of it because it's all game playing and foolish ideas and, 7 texts that'll get them hooked and 3 ways, she's into you. And it's just so situational and game playing and none of it going back to what do I think the problems are for marriage. Preparation is one of the problems. I think people are learning dating quote skills that don't translate to healthy marriages. And so, it's like game playing, like trying to get them into you or hooked on you, or the 3-day rule, like don't call them back. So that'll pique their interest. I'm like, do you want to do that for the next 45 years in your marriage? Like, I have to play hard to get so that my wife is interested. Like, come on, man. So I think for a lot of people, it's just a lot of the advice out there is ineffective, not practical, and not helpful for an actual healthy long-term relationship. And so people are ill-equipped. And then I think, going back to my 3 pillars of community, intentionality, and personal responsibility, the personal responsibility side is we've got to get healthy as individuals, because whatever baggage we bring in the marriage that we don't deal with goes back to what I said before. Your spouse gets a front row seat to what that looks like. And so if singles would spend as much time kind of dealing with childhood baggage and past trauma and relational stuff and getting as healthy as they can before they step into relationships, we wouldn't have half the problems that we end up having in marriage. And so, there's a myriad of problems, but I guess, off the top of my head, that's where I'd go.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes complete sense. And I'm just grateful that I don't have to learn how to practice any of that stuff right now. So
absolutely.
So listen, we've been able to unpack quite a bit here today, but I'm sure there might be something that we may not have touched on. So if there was one thing that you'd want our listeners to take away from our conversation today, what would that be?
Yeah, I would just say, and this really would apply to married or dating people, just to set the expectation in a realistic place. I think one of the biggest struggles for couples is just managing differences. And I think we've bought into the myth and lie that we would be able to resolve every issue we have in marriage. And the reality is there's a set of specific unresolvable issues we'll never get there. And so part of the key to marriage success is how we manage those differences. And specifically, when I'm working with couples, I call it closing the gaps. And so the idea is we have these areas of gaps, where you're an introvert, I'm an extrovert. You're a saver, I'm a spender. You have more of an avoidant attachment style. You like time alone, and I love connection and touch and all that kind of stuff. And that's where we get stuck. And if your goal is to find a meet in the middle, 50-50 perfect compromise in these areas, you're going to be frustrated and you're going to continue to have conflict around them. If you can learn to close the gap, which is, I'm going to take a step towards you, and you're going to take a step towards me, the gap between those differences is smaller, and we'll have, less conflict. And so absolutely resolve the issues that are solvable. But for a lot of them, it's how do we manage those differences, and when can we celebrate, our differences, and then when we can't celebrate them because they're frustrating and painful enough, how do we close the gap and learn to both accept and accommodate each other in those ways? So I think how we manage differences is probably, a key area in relationship success.
Yeah, and what a great way to summarize that. And I like that analogy, and I'm going to borrow it from you in the future. And I talk about the 3-legged stool and being on the same page. It's really about closing that gap. It doesn't mean that they have to. We totally agree. And I like the example of the saver and the spender. As long as you understand where each other's coming from, we can create some common ground within that. Doesn't mean they need to be one who has to acquiesce to the other, but we have an understanding and a mutual respect built around.
Well, and they never will, right?
No,
I mean, sometimes you're talking about ingrained personality differences. And so, but if the spender's willing to say, I'll cut out Starbucks once a week because I value you, and that only saves $20 a month, but it's me saying I value you and I'm stepping towards you. And if the saver, never wants to go out to eat because that's more expensive than eating at home, but the saver says, I know you like to have dinner together and that's a way we connect. So, I'll go out to dinner twice a month. We're not closing it, but we've stepped closer. And now we've shown we value the other person, and we're moving towards each other. And so it's just, how do you do that in all the different areas of your relationship where there's big differences?
Yeah, just love that. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Eric, for being on the show today. We're able to unpack quite a bit about what it is to have a successful marriage, what it takes to really to be intentional in our marriages. And if someone wanted to get involved with your work and involved with any of your programs, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I just think the website, alteredmarriage.com, and it's spelled like an altar. So ALTARED, marriage.com. And if you go to alteredmarriage.com, /gift, I've got a couple free little kind of PDF ebooks, one for daters called the Daters Manifesto, and another one's called the Relationship Rhythm, where I really talk about it. And you like this because it's about intentionality. So how can you create an intentional rhythm each week that maintains connection and resolves conflict and some of those kind of things? So they can grab a free gift there and check out all the other resources.
Right on. Well, I'll make sure I put all that information in the show notes so folks can reach out and get a hold of you. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. It was an outstanding conversation.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.